Close your eye for a moment and imagine the future of Sukabumi. Do we see children walking miles to find a clean water? Do we see a forest fading to silence because of uncontrolled growth? Or do we see a land where cities and villages rise together, where technology and nature lives in harmony, and where the young generation stands proudly as the guardians of tomorrow? Today, we gather here not only to celebrate words, but also to awaken our responsibility. Because the future of Sukabumi is not written in the government plans. It's not written in a book, but it is written by our actions, courage, and dreams as the young generation today. Honorable judges, respectable the audience, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Greetings everyone, my name is Hafizh and I'm from Al-Basam Tahfizh Boarding School. Before I proceed, let us praise and thank to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala who has given His blessing and merciful to all of us today. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Sukabumi. Sukabumi is the biggest regency in Indonesia with so many beautiful things. The longest suspension bridge in Southeast Asia, the fresh and clean air, and of course, mochi. In 2018, Sukabumi was recognized by UNESCO through Chiltu as a global geopark destination in the world. Congratulations. Ladies and gentlemen, if we talk about small but wealthy country, of course we like to say if Singapore is the biggest answer, right? Okay. But do you know if Sukabumi territory is 5 times bigger than Singapore and complete with a natural resource? For example, we can easily find a clean water to drink. It's better instead we have to import it as in Singapore. But with smaller and far less resource, how can Singapore become wealthier than Sukabumi? Back to 1965, when Singapore just gained their independence. In that time, their condition is even worse than Sukabumi today. Illiteracy and poverty were endemic everywhere until their first leader, Lee Kuan Yew, decided to change them forever. Today, if we read about the miracle story of Singapore, we'll find a lot of their success factors, such as a strategic position, foreign investment, and good governance. But also don't forget about their high human quality through a high level of literacy. If we talk about Indonesia, especially Sukabumi, you'll find we already have a basic reading skills, but we still don't have a high level of literacy. So that's the problem. Literacy is not only about ability to writing and reading, but also about ability to think creatively, innovatively, critically, independently, and the ability to connect information in this era of globalizations. So as a young generation, thing that we can do and should do is to improve our literacy level. But how? Firstly, by changing our mindset to be more critical. 2 years before the proclamations, our founding father Tan Malaka said that the reason why this country will never develop because of our closed mind thinking, like always linking everything to the mystical or spiritual things. And it can lead someone to believe illogical news such as babi ngepet, because they are too lazy to thinking and it's very easy to give up on their faith. So the way out of this problem is to start thinking about something critically by start with why. That is the key of literacy. Start with why. Why there's this demonstration last month, why there's cabinet reshuffle, why Israel doing genocide, why, and why. See that the why will teach us how can we create and thinking critically. And of course, it's better even we think something that's controversial. Of course, we don't need to think as extreme as Plato, Aristotle, and the others. But with always asking about something like what, how, and why will make us open our mind and force us to think more critically. Next, let's talk about a mindset. For me, the biggest mistake on mindset is a fear of making mistakes. Because if someone fears to make a mistake, he will not do anything in his life. Because if someone dares to do something new in his life and fail, he can evaluate and learn from his mistakes. So he can do it much better in the next time. Just like a baby who takes his first step, or like a child who learns to drive a bike. Mistakes has been designed for humans to learn. So don't ever afraid to make a mistakes. And of course, with a calculated risk. And the last thing, as a solution to increase our literacy level, is to start with a book. As we know, Indonesia has a low reading index if we compare it with another country like Japan, China, and even Vietnam. But we're also proud because Sukabumi has become a second highest literacy rate in West Java in 2025. Congratulations again. Reading a book is not only a hobby, but it's an obligation for us as the young generation who want to make Sukabumi become better. So right now, start to read a book. If you don't like to read a book, you can start to read something that you like. For example, my friend is loved to watch anime, so he started to read a book about Japanese culture. See that reading a book is our basic way to improve and increase our literacy level. As Mark Twain said, a man who doesn't read do not have or has not an advantage over than a man who cannot read. As Singapore, a successful region starts from the developed citizens. As the young generation who want to make Sukabumi better, let's start to change our mindset. Let's start to think critically, and let's start to reading a book. Through my speech, I hope it's not only sharing about idea, but also a call to actions. Together, we can develop the Sukabumi and create a future where nature is not destroyed by progress, but walk hand in hand with it. We also always hope and pray that Allah will give His merciful and blessing to Sukabumi, for the governments to get the power to handle their jobs, for the young generations to become the pride of Sukabumi in the future. Ladies and gentlemen, as students or as a human beings who always learning, we're better learning from our mistakes instead of doing nothing. Because before we develop this Sukabumi together, we need to develop great individuals. And that's all start with you. I'm Hafizh, thank you very much. That's all from me. I beg your pardon. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.